Welcome back to another episode of What's New in Beauty. My name is Nia Lee, and I'm super excited to have you here. If this is your first time listening, this is the beauty podcast where I just love to talk about new and exciting things that are happening in the beauty industry. I love to give my 2 cents on things, and I love to kind of analyze business moves as well with everything that's kind of going on in the beauty industry and such. Now, this episode is going to be a little bit different than my normal kind of hot topics, beauty news, because, the thing about me, and if you don't know who I am, my name is Nia Lee, by the way, which I think I said in the intro. So let me just stop. I'm a regular civilian. I essentially, my day job or what I do in my business is I actually help beauty brands with their social media, everything from content strategy to video content creation, social media management, all that fun stuff, partnerships, influencers, all that. So I have a really, interesting lens in the sense that I understand what's going on front facing, but also behind the scenes as well. And I've always, wanted to help beauty brands. Beauty has always been my first love. If you didn't know, I wanted to be a makeup artist, YouTube beauty guru, literally 6 or 7, maybe 8 years ago now. I don't know. Time is going super, super quickly, but I always love to help. And I have there's something about me that just wants to speak life into those, and especially in the beauty industry, but also just speaking to founders, which I have a close relationship with. I understand the thoughts and the things that go in your brain in the sense of it's hard to just kind of have to figure it all out yourself. And so with this podcast episode, I kind of want to allow this to be a space where I'm actually helping you and maybe giving you some valuable tips, tricks, knowledge, however you kind of want to slice it, so that you can go off and have a successful beauty brand as well. And just to give you a little bit of my stats, I've worked with brands such as Shea Moisture, NYX Cosmetics, Bite Beauty, Canva, Well.ca, The Main Choice, Curls. My extensive of the world of beauty has really, allowed me to kind of have this lens, and it also allows me to understand where you're coming from as well too. So if you're a beauty founder, if you own a beauty brand, if you're thinking about launching your own beauty brand, this is going to be the podcast episode for you, because I'm going to be talking about 10 things to take away from a successful beauty co-founder as well as investor. And this kind of came to be, and shout out to Beauty Independent for always coming through. They dropped this article, I believe it was a couple weeks ago, about the co-founder or the founding team of Dibs Beauty, which was a brand that I had on my radar because when I was on TikTok, I saw a lot of Black influencers, Black women influencers to be exact, who typically you don't really see on a lot of, brand trips typically, but they have such a strong voice and they have such a prominent voice in the influencer space in their niches. And I saw that a lot of them were on the Dibs Beauty brand trip that they did. And what I loved about it was that you could just tell that the brand trip was incredibly intentional, and they weren't just focused on, influencers with big numbers and whatnot. It really was about the influencers themselves kind of being a champion in their own right. And so long story less long, I had Dibs Beauty literally on my brain. So when this article came out talking about after achieving 2 significant beauty brand exits, can Tula and Bobbi Brown co-founder Ken Landis land a third with Dibs Beauty? And just to give you a little bit of a background about Ken, he co-founded Bobbi Brown, and that sold to Estee Lauder in 1995. He also launched, co-founded Tula Skincare, which is probably one of the biggest, kind of Gen Z-esque, beauty brands or skincare brands that have come out in the last couple years. And he sold it to Procter & Gamble in 2022. And he's also on the founding team of Dibs Beauty. And he actually has, with his Tula co-founder as well. And what I loved about this article altogether was just how many gems I got from it. And I was able to narrow it down to 10 specific gems. So without further ado, let me just jump straight into it, because without you reading this long article, I'm essentially going to break down the top things that I took from it and that you can take from it as well. First thing, create your own demand, which I think is so key and important, because so much of what we see about the beauty industry of people saying it's oversaturated and it's this and that, even though I personally do not believe the beauty industry is saturated at all. I do not believe that. I have said this over and over and over again. I've put up posts about it. I've tweeted about it, X, Y, and Z. I just don't believe the industry is saturated because I always believe there's going to be a community of people that want to be represented. And the beauty industry does a thing where it sometimes makes you feel like not everybody's being represented, but especially now when anybody is like can start a beauty brand, can find their own lane. This is kind of your time to do that. Back in the day when it was really just kind of the big guys running things like the Revlons and the L'Oreals, and the Maybellines, there wasn't really a lot of diversity, right? And I think the most diverse thing that we ever saw in the beauty industry from what I saw was like MAC Cosmetics, even though they really didn't even push the envelope that much as what we wanted to. But long story less long, this conversation of creating your own demand is really dope because I think a lot of the times we assume that like people don't need our product, or sometimes we don't even do the research to figure out what is it that people actually want, right? And I also think outside of that, when you create your own demand, right? When I think of a brand creating their own demand, the first brand that comes to mind for me is Summer Fridays. When Summer Fridays came out the gate and said, hey, here's our jet lag mask, and that was like their claim to fame, and everybody knew them because of that, I really feel like they created their own demand because it kind of felt like you had to get it in order to be a part of the Summer Fridays kind of like influencer cool girl group. And the good thing about Summer Fridays, which I love, which I've never actually purchased anything from them, which is so crazy, but I use them as an example as such a brand that just gets it, because they've really been able to create their own ecosystem of people that, trust their products, whether it's skincare, makeup, the hybrid, you name it. But they created their own demand by doing that. I believe they had put out a wait list for jet lag mask. I don't even know if they even had product as of yet. Another brand that reminds me of doing this is Glow Recipe when they came out with like their watermelon jelly mask. Like they created their own demand by saying, hey, this is a product that we have. Maybe they did buy samples, or maybe they did put up some sort of wait list. I think that's what Summer Fridays did. They ended up putting some sort of wait list or something to kind of create the sense of urgency that, you saw everybody and their mom using this mask. Mariana, the founder or the co-founder, she was an influencer in her own right as well. So it became one of those things was, again, right place, right time. She just ended up being an influencer that, was really in that peak beauty lifestyle, kind of range. And she was able to do that and then also create a lot of FOMO and a lot of demand amongst her other influencer, friends and whatnot. So I think there's so much power in creating your own demand in the sense that like you have a product and you really want to see if people really mess with it or not, if they really want to buy it. And if you market it enough and, put it in a certain way, the creatives are really dope. Again, the relationships, the partnerships, all that stuff makes sense. You end up kind of creating your own ecosystem and your own world and your own demand. So much so that like it becomes this thing where you feel like everybody in the world is using it. And that's what the jet lag mask was kind of like. It felt like everybody either knew about it, used it, or a certain amount of people could only get it. And what I loved was that they created their own demand that way. And then on top of that, I think it was really interesting to see how they were really able to, again, create their own demand with just more of their products that they've put out. And I think any brand that is able to do this and really build a lot of hype around the brand, but also the product itself, but even just like the story, like I think there's so many other elements to it. It really allows you to create your own universe. So much so that like, because you're creating your own demand in your own universe, people by proxy want to be a part of that, right? Because again, people always want to feel like they belong. And if you create something that speaks to a certain community of people, or even just speaks to a person, you'd be surprised how many people are like, oh my God, I relate to that. Or, oh my God, I wish I had that. And you're able to do that when you kind of create your own demand that way. So I think that was really, just top needed to be said from jump. And that's one of the things that I took away from that article. Secondly, it was all about starting small and making sure you have a proof of concept, which kind of goes back into the creating your own demand, which is all about, instead of buying a bunch of inventory on products that you have not, you don't even know if people care about it, or you don't even know if people even want this thing. Essentially, I've seen people get samples. I've seen people, get a certain amount of products as well too. I've just seen so many people be creative, but I think what works here is really saying, hey, let's start small, super duper small, maybe even niche, maybe even exclusive, and really see if we have something here, right? I think, again, so many so many people jump into starting a beauty brand and products and all that kind of stuff, but they don't really even do the research, let alone they don't even really take the time to like even say to themselves, is this something that people even want, right? And I even recognize this as well too with my brand Oily Skincare, which was a subscription box for oily acne prone skin. I didn't create enough demand, right? I didn't create enough demand, let alone a proof of concept before I shilled out hundreds of dollars to ensure this thing worked. I mean, lo and behold, it'll still come back. It'll find its way. But I think, again, where a lot of brands struggle, where I've seen, is that they will buy a bunch of inventory and then be stuck with a bunch of inventory because nobody knows who they are. Nobody cares about their products. It's the same face oil over and over again. It's the same skin tool. It's the same thing that everybody's selling. But at the end of the day, your product is just as good as your marketing and vice versa, right? You could have the best product in the world, but if nobody knows about it, you kind of just have a great product and that's it, right? The marketing as well as the great product has to work. So that's why I think it's super important to start small. And the good thing about starting small too is that if anything happens, like you can always get bigger. Like you can always get bigger. You can make mistakes in the beginning. People can see the evolution, right? I'm going to take it back to Summer Fridays. Again, when they came out with their jet lag mask, I think one of the biggest things about them was that it had a smell to it. It had a fragrance to it that was very sensitive and a lot of people didn't end up liking. So I talked about this on another podcast episode as well when they reformulated it because they actually listened to their community. And one of the biggest things that I don't see a lot of brands do is ever listen to their community. Like people are telling you in the comments, in your stories, in your DMs, how much they want something from you. And like by you simply ignoring them or, focusing on something else, like you're losing out on this opportunity. And that's how a lot of people end up losing trust in brands and even in you because they're thinking to themselves, we're telling you this is what we want and you're not listening, right? And I think when it comes down to, again, this conversation of starting small and then having that proof of concept, you really allow yourself to evolve. And the best thing about it is people love to see brands evolve. They love to see brands level up. They love to see brands get a rebrand. They love to see brands, from where they were to where they are now. I mean, you have that whole, how it started, how it's going trend. So I think there's so much value in starting small, one, financially, but also just to kind of see if it's even something that people will even care about. And then having that proof of concept before you scale, before you are really big, before you buy all of that inventory and don't have anybody buying any of your products because, that happens and that's a reality. So start small and then have that proof of concept. Third, focus on being exclusive in retail locally and internationally. Now, this totally blew my mind because particularly, Ken speaks to this, right? He speaks to this in the Beauty Independent article about Bobbi Brown, how Bobbi Brown, they really wanted it to be very exclusive to certain retailers. And I was having this conversation again with somebody where I feel like brands jump into retail really quickly and spread themselves incredibly thin. They're literally everywhere, but nothing is coming off the shelves. And I think there's something to be said, especially if you're like D2C or you're just selling your product, on Etsy or your own website or Instagram, however you want to fly it, even though I think you should always have your own website to buy your products. That should be the number one thing. But I think sometimes people jump into retail really quick and think that retail is this saving grace and that retail is going to save me and my product's going to fly off the shelves. And at the end of the day, you have to understand that in a sense, retail is kind of doing you a favor because they've already built up the audience. They've already built up the clout. They have a bunch of brands in there that are most likely killing it. You are then part of that ecosystem, right? So it's not really up to the retailer so much to, say, hey, like, here's your product. I mean, sure, there's retailers that will do that. But again, your brand has to be something that everybody and their mom is talking about, right? I think of Sephora especially for this. And I think of also Ulta as well, too. Like, for example, when Live Tinted was getting into Ulta, like, I remember seeing them marketing and campaigning heavy because I believe you have to do a lot of that in the beginning stages to really solidify the importance of having you on the shelf, as well as, having that small shelf space turn into a bigger shelf space, but also have that bigger shelf space turn into all the Ulta stores, right? And in the lane of Sephora, like one of my favorite brands, Ami Colleen, when they were getting into Sephora as well too, even Topicals as well too, which is another brand. 2 Black women owned brands. Excellent, by the way. I've owned their products and they're fabulous. Particularly to that, like, same thing. There was a lot of campaigning that had to go into that. And it wasn't just about getting on the shelf. It was about staying on the shelf. And I think a lot of people forget that when it comes to retail locally, but also sometimes they don't really think about the international element as well too. And I think there's something really, really key there about being exclusive to certain retailers. And he speaks about this with Bobbi Brown in particular, about wanting to, really be in certain international markets and wanting to be in certain stores as well too. Again, here's a direct quote. He said, we would say no to everybody and focus on being either number 1 or certainly top 5 in every door we were in. We were very exclusive in certain chains. We were exclusive with Bergdorf Goodman. Bergdorf? I'm saying that wrong. Bergdorf. Bergdorf. I'm assuming, again, high-end retailer. Then we became exclusive with Neiman Marcus, and we would say no to Saks, and we'd say no to Bloomingdale's, or we'd say no to Nordstrom until we felt we got the level of penetration that we wanted. And I think that's super, super important, because at the end of the day, you might think being in all of those retailers is doing you good, but I just think if you're everywhere, it takes away a certain specialty about your product itself. And then also, sometimes I see a lot of brands, especially smaller brands, they go super duper heavy in like the kind of artisan craft pop-up, kind of way. And like, that's fine. But again, I think it's super important to have your product specific at a retailer. Again, it's specific at a retailer where you can kind of shine, right? Again, for Ken, he was like, we want it to be number 1 or we want it to be top 5. Like, what is the point of going to a retailer if I'm just going to be another brand on the shelf? And I think a lot of people don't take those things into consideration, and they say to themselves, I just need to be everywhere because I just need my product to be everywhere, because if my product's everywhere, everybody is going to be able to find it. Everyone's going to buy. That is not the case. And I say this as a consumer of beauty products as well. Like, if there's a beauty product that I want, I'm going to get it. Right. But again, there's only certain retailers that I will go out of my way to go to. Right. I would rather go to your website and actually purchase your product 9 times out of 10, because again, if you're just everywhere, but again, you're not even really in the retailers that really makes sense for me, I'm not going to be intrigued. Right. So I think it's really important when you are saying to yourself, where do we want to be when it comes to retailers, you're very specific about that. And again, you're very exclusive to that retailer. So it doesn't feel like you can be everywhere, right? Again, there's nothing wrong with being in certain specific spaces, right? But be in a space where you are either looked at as like a number 1 or a top 5 brand. And then also have all these other perks and things that are going on with your brands as well too. Like, I was having a conversation with a friend of mine who owns her own skincare brand, and I saw that that same skincare brand retails at this really popular, huge retailer. And I saw that retailer do a partnership with a brand. And I said to myself, well, damn, when are you going to get this kind of opportunity? And they were telling me about the issues with that retailer and whatnot. But outside of that, I think it's really important that when you are at certain retailers that you really say to yourself, I'm going to do everything that I possibly can to ensure that these people who are in these retail spaces understand the product. They know who I am. They feel like there's a connection. And I got to shout out, my girl Kavisha, who owns Everyday Skincare, who recently launched into the detox market. And one of the things that I loved that she was able to do was really connect with the people who were working in the detox market to ensure they had an understanding about, their products and what they were doing and the steps of how to use it. And, we were even helping them film a cool teaser masterclass. We also did it for the launch party as well. I think it's really, really important that you build those relationships with those retailers as well too. And then here's the thing. If you can be exclusive with those retailers internationally, but also locally, that will then give you an opportunity to, again, really have those closer relationships with the people who are within the retail spaces. Again, the people who are essentially going to be, talking about your product on a daily basis, because surely you're not going to be there. I think there's something important to be said about that. And then you can't be everywhere if your products are everywhere, meaning you can't be at like 50 stores if your products are 50 stores, because that sounds strenuous. I think it makes sense to be at maybe 10 stores or maybe 5 stores. But again, those stores and those retailers are very specific, and you have a close relationship with the advisors, the people who are again on the floor talking about your product and recommending your product, and really having those relationships down pat. And if you're in every single retailer, that can be difficult. So I think, again, outside of just being exclusive and how important that is, I think at the end of the day, just thinking long term, if you're at 50 retailers, that can be strenuous. Outside of that, next up is this conversation of don't expand and not expanding, and accepting capital really early. And again, this kind of goes back to this conversation of exclusivity, right? Where again, people think that they need a lump sum of money right off the bat to get their brand off the ground. And that could be true. But when you take capital really early, or when you kind of expand really early, it just feels like something within the brand itself is not like, it's too many moving pieces. And I think now more than ever, the consumer is incredibly smart. And when they see brands just be super duper quick with everything, it feels like a lot. And at the end of the day, most brands, they've got obviously, some of these big brands have already planned out their 2025 launches, maybe even 2026 launches. Like, it's that serious. But at the end of the day, I think if you're not at that level, then focus on the now and focus on today and focus on how can we be better at what we're currently doing today. Like, instead of coming out with 6 or 7 products, let's come out with 1 great product, right? Or let's come out with 3 great products, right? Like Rhode Skin, for example, or Rhode Beauty. When they launched, they came out with a very small select of products. I actually bought the products when they actually started shipping to Canada. I was kind of low-key upset that they didn't have a cleanser, but they had like a moisturizer and a serum. And of course, they had their lip peptide serum, gloss, oil things, which are fabulous, by the way. I will say that. I literally have 3 of them, and they're all in different bags. But and then they recently just came out with another, shade or flavor of the lip oil. And then they also just came out with an essence recently. But even then, like, you can tell there's some intentionality to that, right? There isn't this whole thing of like, we need to expand and we need to launch the next thing in the next 2 months and 3 months and so on. I'm sure there's a timeline. I'm sure all those things matter, but I think it's super important that you don't expand really early and come up with 80 gazillion products. Focus on that one product, but then also taking that capital and thinking that having a lot more money, might be great and shiny in the beginning, but when you're trying to build a brand, like literally every piece of the money that you make should kind of be going back into the brand in some way, shape, or form. There's some brands that have been out and about for a few years now that are still not even profitable because they've taken a lot of capital early on, thinking that was going to, really blow their brand up in a way, and it might have, but you still are not reaching those goals / your brand just doesn't really have the clout like that. And just because you have a lot of money attached to your brand, you can launch products, doesn't mean anything. Like, again, the only people that I can really see that working with is huge celebrity brands like the Fenty's, Fenty Beauty, Fenty Skin, Rare Skin, same thing, or Rare Beauty. I mean, when Selena launches a product every 3 months, like, they can do that because 9 times out of 10 people are going to buy those products. And again, they've got a schedule like that. For you, with your brand, again, whether you just got started or maybe you've been 3 to 5 years in the game, maybe 10 plus years in the game, there's this idea that, again, this conversation, and I wouldn't say 10 years in the game is taking capital, if you want to take capital, sure. But again, when you're taking that capital, understand exactly what's going on with that capital and where you can actually place it for better success for your business. And then thinking that you're going to take this capital and expand and launch a bunch of products, like, that's not really even it. Like, 9 times out of 10, your capital really should kind of be going to, again, back into the business, product development, research, again, really trying to make the best product you can. And then like the marketing. And I'm not even just saying that because I'm in marketing, but the amount of money that brands are putting toward their marketing budgets, millions of dollars, guys, millions of dollars. So if you're getting capital 500 grand or less, like, of course, you're not going to have $1 million marketing budget, right? But you have to have an idea about where to put that exactly. And if you can't ask yourself, okay, what am I going to do with a $500,000 investment? Then maybe you're not ready for the expansion. Maybe you're just not ready for that capital right now, and that's fine. Actually, you want to get to a point where you can kind of do as much as you can with that brand so that an investor or something in relation to that, even Ken himself, who is an investor himself, is looking for brands that have really kind of gotten their speed already, right? We don't want to feel like we have to go in and really kind of transform your brand. And that's what most investors at this point, they're looking for brands that, again, have a proof of concept, have, done the grassroots work, have put in their own money. I kind of feel like I'm going into Shark Tank mode a little bit. Favorite show, by the way, also Dragon's Den, shout out to them. But same deal, like they don't want to just feel like they got to put all their money into you and you're going to use that money to build your business. Like, no, the business has had to have started. You have had to have had some sort of traction. And also, you've done all the things necessary that when we give you this $500,000 investment or $1 million investment or whatever, it means that you're actually going to use it in the best way possible and allocate it properly. And that doesn't mean launching a whole new set of products right off the bat. It doesn't necessarily mean spending all that money on marketing either. It really just comes down to you having an idea of exactly where everything fits in your business. And if you're not there yet, if you can't even have those conversations yet, you probably shouldn't be expanding / you probably shouldn't be taking capital early. Next up, partner with experts who might not be in the same industry as you, but have vast knowledge and connections in a different industry. And I think this is really important as well, too, because so much so that you think that you have to only work with people in that particular industry when some of the people who are your best allies and your best partners and the best connections are people who have done amazing work in their respective fields and are now coming over to your team, right? And who can then have a lot more insight from almost like a bird's eye view or a third party view, but also have expertise in a certain area. So for example, if you're heavily in the beauty industry, you're a founder, you're marketing, however you want to slice it, I think it's really important that you take the time to build relationships with people outside of the beauty community, but do things that are very adjacent. So having a relationship with somebody in the tech space, having a relationship with somebody in the product development space, chemist space as well too. And again, this can be from different industries as well. I'm not necessarily saying you got to have connections with a beauty chemist. You could have connections with a chemist who comes up with solutions about how to, I don't know, maybe something in like the oil industry, or maybe that's not even a great example, but something in a different industry. But again, these things can be transferable in some way, shape, or form. And I think, again, you count out the people who have vast knowledge about certain aspects of their industry that then can say to yourself, well, actually, you're looking at it. I understand you're a founder and you're in beauty, but you're not really even looking at it from this perspective, right? And again, when you're really in the trenches and it's only you, let's just say, your brain is clogged and always thinking about all the things. So it makes the most sense to have somebody who's part of the team, who's a partner, who's a connection, collaboration, however you want to slice it. Somebody who has vast knowledge about their industry, but that can also bring those skills over to you. And again, you can kind of be a sounding board in that way as well too, because again, when you're heavily in the beauty industry, sometimes everything you think is just like, oh my God, beauty, beauty, beauty. I was just on a conversation today with a gentleman who is heavily in the finance world, but is now in finance, but also investment. But he's also, again, he comes from a world of, again, not beauty, but then is now looking to get into beauty as well too, because or consumer packaged goods, I should say, which kind of opens up the floodgates for more opportunities. But beauty falls in that category as well. And he might not have all the knowledge and all the things. He told me he was on the manufacturing side. So he understood, liquids and products and, chemistry and whatnot. But again, you never know what those individuals are going to be able to pick up from you, and / you will never know what you're going to pick up from those individuals as well. So make those connections, partner with those people as well, because they also have an insight that you don't have, right? They have expertise in an industry that you don't have that's still very adjacent and can be used because those skills can always be transferable. Now, the conversation of capital, I think, is always really, really important. And this point about accepting capital when you want to make bigger strategic moves is really, really important. Because again, going back to this conversation of accepting capital really early and not expanding, or expanding in a way that's completely, just way too fast and not even in the right space of where you're trying to go, I think that ends up being a detriment. But accept capital when you want to make bigger strategic moves, i.e. get into retail, right? Because retail in itself is an investment. A lot of people, like I said, don't realize that it's not about getting into retail. The flex is not getting into retail. The flex is staying in retail. The flex is getting a bigger shelf space. The flex is, instead of you being in one store, you're in 500 stores. But a lot of people don't realize it costs a lot of money to be in retail stores. It costs so much money because, again, these retailers have mandates and they have, again, you've got to essentially pay for this kind of opportunity in a sense. And people don't realize that that's really where your money should be going, aside from the other things that are going on as well, too, like product development and hiring employees and so on. But again, you don't even have to get to that point. The retail conversation is really big because people don't realize it costs a lot of money to get into retail. So accepting capital, accepting that opportunity to have somebody come in as a partner financially, but also business-wise, I think is really key because, again, then you can partner with somebody who's in that retail space or has some sort of connection in the world of retail and really take the brand to the next level. And I think that is the best way I can describe about you using your capital to really take off instead of using your capital just to pay yourself or just to create a new product. When at the end of the day, if nobody even cares about the first initial product, why do you think anyone's going to care about the second one? Like, some of y'all be launching products like you are on Fenty's budget and timeline, and you're not. Like, you are not. Nobody's asking for this. You don't even have that kind of clout that if you came out with that product, people are going to care. Because at the end of the day, again, this whole conversation of creating your own demand, creating your own universe. If you haven't even done that, then why are you launching all these products? Why do you want to be in all these retail stores, right? So again, if you're not asking yourself these questions or having these kind of, internal dialogues, or again, talking to your partners about these moves that you're trying to make, and especially when capital comes involved, because you have to understand someone now is giving you that money. They want, and it could be a loan, it could be something, it's 9 times out of 10 that they're going to want their money back. They want their money back. It's not even a maybe or what. They want their money back. So not only do they want their money back, but they want you to make more money. Because what is the point of me investing $1 million into you, or $2 million, or $5 million, and me not see any return in that? Nobody's doing anything out of charity here, unfortunately. So realistically speaking, when you do get into a space of wanting to get into retail and wanting to take your brand to the next level, accept capital then. Don't accept capital just because, again, you think you want to launch a new product because you think people are going to care about it. 9 times out of 10, they don't. They don't even really care about your first initial product. So there's that conversation needs to be had as well. Next up, this conversation of collaborating and partnering with influencers who aren't really directly related to the product you're selling. But again, make it worth their while, i.e. rev share, co-brands, in that kind of vein. And the best example that I can kind of use for this conversation of influencers and, who are, I wouldn't say necessarily directly related. Like, I think there's benefits to working with creators who are not directly in that industry. Because I think if you have a beauty brand, a lifestyle brand, a wellness brand, and you work with brands who are specifically in those niches, sometimes it kind of feels like a broken telephone because everybody's kind of saying the same thing. If you're a beauty brand and you end up partnering with like an influencer who is, let's just say, in the golf world or sports or, I mentioned sports, golf, maybe even in construction, maybe an engineer, that's something different. That's something we haven't seen before. It's kind of like when Mielle wanted to partner with the ladies of LSU to essentially make them sponsors for their products. And some people would say, oh, that kind of seems, that kind of makes sense, but I'm not sure. But again, when you really look at it, these LSU basketball players, these incredible women who dominated, they've got their edges laid, lashes out, their nails are looking good. They're setting the tone for beauty. But a lot of people don't look at them that way because, for whatever reason. But here Mielle comes and says, well, we want them to be ambassadors because at the end of the day, we want them, one, understanding that when you're playing sports and your hair gets sweaty and you're this, that, and the third, we want your hair to look cute. We want your edges to be laid. We want it to be moisturized. So this falls in line of that. We wouldn't directly think, oh yeah, LSU basketball players and like a textured hair care brand. You won't think that right away. But it just made sense when it happened. And so many people were ecstatic for the partnership. And again, this had a great reflection on Mielle because it made them really culturally relevant, which they are. They continue to be culturally relevant with everything they do. But I also think it's super important that when you have those opportunities to collaborate and partner with influencers, really make it worth their while. Like, I think the best example, again, I can use for this is Nude Sticks. Like, Nude Sticks did a partnership collaboration with, I believe it was Hilary Duff, and they also did it with Glamzilla, and they also recently did it with Sofia Richie. And I remember talking about the Sofia Richie partnership, not on the podcast, but I did a TikTok about it, saying I don't understand where this is coming from. Did Nude Sticks think that Sofia Richie was going to blow up? Did they have an inside scoop that she was going to get married and that everyone was going to have this Sofia Richie aesthetic? I have no idea. Maybe they did. I have no idea. But it ended up being such a hit. And even with the Glamzilla partnership as well, finding out that that was like some sort of an opportunity for them to essentially become investors in the brand. And it wasn't just a brand giving an influencer a check. It was, yeah, here's a check, but here's also an opportunity to make money. Here's an opportunity to really allow that thing to keep moving forward. And I don't know how long the partnership was. I don't know, again, the breakdown of rev share or co-branding or whatnot. But I think it's super important especially when you have a great relationship with an influencer, because that's the thing, like more than anything, I'm going to be talking more about influencers, but people are getting smarter when it comes to influencers. People might even say they're getting tired of influencers. I think as a whole, everybody is just at a point now where they want honesty and truth and genuine everything. So if you see an influencer or a creator genuinely loving your product, who genuinely has an audience that they've built and everything feels organic, everyone's engaged, partner with those influencers, right? Partner with them, collaborate with them, and then say to them, hey, we want this to not just be a one-off. Like, we want you to essentially kind of be an ambassador for life. We want you to feel like you're really a part of essentially the trajectory of our brand as well too, because you've done so many amazing things for our brand. I think with Glamzilla, she ended up getting one of their products super duper viral, and then they ended up doing a partnership with her as well too. And like I said, she is a partner or an investor in the brand in some way, shape, or form. Again, Hilary Duff, I believe, is one as well. I think Chelsea Handler for Nude Sticks. Again, there's a bunch of people who are eating. But at the end of the day, I think it's super duper important to have those relationships with those influencers and really build those genuine connections. And again, look for people who are outside of the particular beauty, wellness, lifestyle industry, and try to find real heroes and real influencers outside of those industries as well too. Not so far that it feels, but again, it's all about storytelling at that point. It's all about the marketing. How are you able to tie your product into that person's life, right? Or how did they tie it into their lives as well too, right? 9 times out of 10, these people are using your products and loving your products and tagging you and so on. You just have to listen. You just have to look and again, make it worth their while. Now, going back to influencers, working with influencers with high engagement and versus followers, I think is a no-brainer. Now more than ever, I think we've seen so many brands come out and say, oh, we paid an influencer this amount and we didn't really see the return on the investment, and, it feels like a flop on the brand as well as the influencer side. Sometimes these brands are not doing their due diligence, and they should be, right? Because at the end of the day, these influencers, most of them, they're just kind of in it for the money, and that's okay, because the brands are also in it for the money as well, too. They wouldn't be reaching out to you and saying, hey, we want to pay you $10,000 if they didn't think that they could probably make more off of the partnership. However, when you decide to go with an influencer who has more followers, but yet the engagement's lacking, you're really shooting yourself in the foot, because Instagram and a lot of these platforms ain't even really showing your content like that. So you got to understand as well too, like, engagement's going to be off. Things are kind of going to be up in the air. And I also think when you focus on the engagement / you focus on the actual connection that your influencers have with their community, but also with brands as well too. Because what I've seen more so than anything is anytime an influencer posts content and it's not brand related, like it's not a partnership, it's not an ad, the content always does really well. But when it's a brand partnership, the content doesn't do well. The likes aren't there, the comments aren't there, the shares aren't there, the saves ain't there, and so on. I've seen it. I've noticed it. That is the number one thing I hate to see. Now, I don't know if the influencer is doing enough due diligence on their end to ensure, because I've seen influencers who say, hey, like, I have this sponsored piece of content coming up. It would be great if you could engage with this and you guys let me do what I do, engage with it. I don't know if enough influencers are doing that, but at the end of the day, the brands are wanting you to have authentic relationships. And so again, brands need to do their due diligence. I'm just talking all over the place. Brands need to do their due diligence. Influencers got to do their due diligence as well too, because it's a reciprocal, beneficial relationship for everybody if everything ends up working out well. Because then you get amazing opportunities of, possibly being a part of the fabric of a company who you dearly love and so on. But outside of that, the engagement piece is really big, because you want that engagement. You want people to be excited. You want people to add commentary, right? Because then again, it gives you more opportunity to take it to the next level, right? As a brand, to say, oh my God, we got all these comments and so on. There's so much that can come of that. And the influencers themselves, again, are the ones with influence. So that's why you'd be paying them. So instead of focusing on followers, focus on the engagement, focus on the genuine relationships they have. If there's someone that's super active with commenting as well too, that's something that's really important, because I've been seeing these influencers get comments and they do not reply back, and I just don't see the point. So look for that healthy engagement and that dialogue and that genuine connection, because then you'll actually know that the influencer cares about what it is that they're putting out for their audience as well. Now, coming up to the last 2 points of the 10 things to take away from a successful beauty co-founder and investor, we're talking about focusing on investing and actually creating an experience with your products, particularly events. Now, I have been singing this to the rooftop, especially with summer. I think more so than anything, at the end of the day, like, brands really need to create experiences, and they need to stop just selling their products. Like, I just saw on Threads, Bread Beauty Supply. Shout out to Bread Beauty Supply. I love Bread Beauty Supply. Again, never bought anything, but obsessed with the brand. This is the life in marketing and beauty. I am obsessed with their branding. I'm obsessed with who they are at a brand. They're such a cool, like, Gen Z, curly hair care, textured hair care brand. And I just saw them put out like an ice cream cart that had like their cute bread logo on it, and like pamphlets of their products. And I just thought it was so cute, because instead of like just, having a random pop-up at a coffee shop or at a fair or a market like the rest of them, let us do something that's going to get people to actually stop. Let's get something that's actually going to create an experience. Let's do something that's going to bring joy into people's lives, like giving them ice cream. Like, are you kidding me? Like, I loved every moment of it. And I've seen so many brands do this over the period. I mean, Summer Fridays has done it as well too. Topicals, shout out to Topicals for coming out with their whole summer camp vibe about, creating just fun experiences for their spotty hotties. I saw Ami Collet did it as well, about hosting masterclasses. Like, it really is about experience and connection and community. And if you're not focusing on that, and you're not actually taking the time to invest in that, then it's just going to be like every other, it's just going to be like every other brand. And like, when you really think about it, you might not have the big budgets, right? but you can partner with people. You can partner with other brands, have brands sponsor things that you're doing. Like, I am such an advocate for partnerships, and I see so many brands do it well, and it makes me so happy. But I don't see enough brands doing it because I don't know if they don't think they have the clout, or again, I think partnering with brands in your similar vein are really important. In the sense of like follower count and engagement and maybe similarity in what it is that you guys are essentially doing. But again, like I've said, I've seen a textured hair care brand like Bread Beauty Supply come out with an ice cream cart, which doesn't really, like, again, it's not synonymous to their brand in the sense of like, you know, they don't really sell ice cream or anything in that vein. But it's summertime and the girls are outside. So that calls for ice cream and that calls for fun vibes. And let's get an ice cream cart out here and let's really create those connections as well too. And again, it comes down to branding and all that type of stuff, because the branding that Bread has is so striking and so beautiful that you're going to want to stop and you're going to want to see if this is a real thing or so on. And again, all those things really, really matter, but it just comes down to the experience that you're creating for people. Like, at the end of the day, I think I wrote this in a thread, you know, people just want fun experiences and a cute swag bag. Like, give the girls a swag bag. It's 2023. People want to take home products. They want to have that opportunity. They want to post it on their stories. They want to get the opportunity to try what's going on. Put something in the budget for that. Like, at the end of the day, people want experiences. They don't just want to hear about your products anymore. That's just point blank and, you know, point blank, plain and simple. Last but not least, this conversation of don't build a company to exit, build it to be profitable and sustainable. And I think this is the perfect way to end this list of 10 things to take away from a successful beauty co-founder and investor. Because again, so many people build a beauty brand or start a beauty brand or find a beauty brand or however you want to slice it and think to themselves, how can I just make more money so that I can eventually, you know, maybe go on to something else or so on. Or again, they don't even have the opportunity to dream that big. And I think that can be really sad because, you know, people start businesses for a plethora of reasons, right? But I think a lot of people don't build businesses to last or to be big, right? Or to really have some sort of, you know, stake in the beauty world. So this conversation of building a brand just to exit or just to move on to the next thing, I mean, hey, everyone's got an agenda, right? Everyone's doing what is in the best interest of them. But I think this conversation of building it to be profitable and sustainable, I think is really great because I think, again, that sustainability part is huge because a lot of people burn themselves out. They completely just, you know, again, running a business, especially when you're doing it by yourself or you've got a small team, it is incredibly taxing. And if you don't have your North Star or your why or people telling you, hey, this is why you're doing what you're doing, it can be hard, right? You want to pack up shop every day. You want to quit every day. And I know so many people can relate to that. And again, I've had conversations, so I know exactly where this is coming through. But I also think it's really, really important that, you know, you build your company to really be profitable. Because I think, again, like I was saying, there's a lot of brands that don't reach profit because they've either taken capital really early or things just didn't work out the way they wanted to. And that's hard to build a profitable beauty brand. It is incredibly hard to do it just by yourself, right? So this is why it's important to partner and collaborate and to bring people in. But this conversation of sustainability, like I said, is super key because being a founder in general, right? Let's take beauty out of it for 2 seconds. Being a founder is stressful. Being somebody who has to do the day-to-day and, you know, you got to connect with people, you got to be on social, you got to fill the bottles, you got to do this, you got to package. It's a lot. And a lot of people don't say to themselves, you know, and I read something today about this conversation about CEOs and founders, that a lot of people who are founders of companies really shouldn't be the CEOs of their companies. And I had the same conversation with a friend of mine as well, too, because we had learned that Rihanna stepped down as a CEO of Savage X Fenty to appoint another lady. And everyone was upset about it but the lady herself has a huge, extensive background. Actually, let me bring the name of her as well, too, because I want to get that right because I think it's really important that we, you know, essentially do that. But long story less long, everybody was kind of saying This is kind of, oh my God, like, I don't know what to believe, and so on and so forth. I can't believe Rihanna's doing this. And there's a plethora of reasons probably why she wanted to step down, right? But the woman that she appointed is named Hillary Super, who was the former CEO of Anthropologie Group. And she also has extensive background in scaling a brand and really taking it to the next level. And again, Rihanna looks like she's going to still have some sort of executive role, and she's still going to be a part of it. But again, like, just because you founded your business doesn't mean you should be running it. Doesn't mean you even have the ability to run it and really take it to the next level and really make it successful. Like, you might have the idea, you might want to focus on that side of things. You might want to focus on the creative. You might want to focus on the formulation. You might want to focus on all those other things that are not contingent on the business being successful and especially being profitable. Because that's the conversation that a lot of people don't want to have, is how do I actually build a profitable beauty brand? How do I actually do that without burning myself to the ground? And again, a lot of the times it could be a plethora of things. But I think more so than anything, this conversation of building a company, not just to exit or just move on to the next thing, but building it so that it actually has life outside of sometimes who we are. Because again, I think sometimes founders can be they can be just so attached to their brand. And it's like, I get it. But if you want to have a successful brand, or you want to take your brand to the next level, you want to launch it in Sephora, you want it to be worthwhile, like, this is not helping, right? You're burning yourself thin. You're wearing all these hats thinking that you're going to get a badge of honor at the end of the day, but you're not, right? And I think a lot of people don't have those honest conversations, and they don't say to themselves, what can I do to ensure that, like, I don't get burnt out, but that my company is still successful and we're still moving in a direction that makes sense to us. So, long story less long, let's recap the 10 things to take away from a successful beauty co-founder and investor. First one, create your own demand. Second one, start small and make sure you have a proof of concept. Focus on being exclusive in retail locally and internationally. Don't expand or accept capital too early. Partner with experts who might not be in the same industry as you, but have vast knowledge and connections in a different industry. Accept capital when you want to make bigger strategic moves, i.e. retail. Collaborate and partner with influencers who aren't directly related to the product you're selling, but, essentially make it worth their while with rev share and co-branding. Work with influencers with high engagement versus, followers. Focus on investing in creating an experience with your products, especially with your events. And last but not least, don't build a company to exit, build it to be profitable and sustainable. And I just feel like these are such important gems. And what better to get these gems from somebody who's been able to do it quite successfully, / who's to say that you can't make these moves as well? Like the brands that Ken Landis has been a part of, from Bobbi Brown to Tula to Dibs, are all successful brands in their own right. They've all sold, right? They've all done amazing things. They're still killing it to this day. And I also think at the end of the day, we should be taking some sort of stock in the fact that when you sign up to create your own beauty brand, and you sign up to be a founder, you don't have all the answers. You just might want to create an amazing product or see a gap and say to yourself, like, I think I can fill it. But if we're really trying to take the brand to the next level, and we really want to kind of move in the way of, essentially our predecessors or brands who have been able to successfully do what they do. Again, I'm sure there's so many other varying factors, but I think this article really opened my eyes to things such as retail and, partnering with influencers and people who are not in your direct industry, of the same beauty ilk, but have such vast knowledge in a different industry, or have connections as well too, because those are really important. Relationships are key. And then again, this conversation of profitability and sustainability, which I feel like sometimes don't always go together, but they can. And I think it's just going to have to take you coming to terms with those particular aspects of your business and saying to yourself, like, what am I good at? What am I doing? Do I need help? What's really, how do we really make things shake here? And a lot of this stuff, it's a marketing play, it's a capital play, it's, a mindset play as well too, this conversation of creating your own demand, and, starting small, these are all things, we don't, in our brains, we might not have this idea that we want to go super duper big, or sometimes we do, but we don't have the steps to get there. And I'm really glad that I was able to do this. And I hope my founders and anybody listening found this helpful. If you're not a beauty founder or not even in the beauty industry, but you want to send this out, please do. I hope it rings true to a lot of people in the sense of, there's certain things that you definitely see that you could work on, or maybe things that you're already doing, but you need to tweak. And I just hope and pray that, everyone's successful out here. Because like I said, the beauty industry is not saturated to me. I do not believe that. I do believe that there is room for everybody, and everybody wants to be heard and represented. So let's do what we can to create brands that really speak to people. And here's what we can do to build successful brands as well too. So that if we want to exit, awesome. But if we want to build it to be something profitable and sustainable, so that, we don't have to kind of be in the trenches all the time, I think a lot of people would, kind of want that as well too. But we'll see. We'll see. If you have any questions, of course, please DM me as well too at Socially Savvy Nia. And I'd be more than happy to help as well too, because I literally love it. I'm full of ideas. I'm full of things, and I like to execute as well too. I know sometimes people come to the table with ideas, but I also like to execute ideas as well too. So if you need any help with that, let your girl know. But until then, I will catch you in the next episode.